Oh, sorry. Did you hear anything that I said?
I heard hello, and that was it.
Okay. Yes, I may have missed a bunch of audio. So is there anything that you said
No,
also?
no, I was
Okay.
just trying to figure out where we were with the audio. I know that we had problems with it in the last instance of this.
You sound a lot better, but I almost wonder. I almost wondered last time if it was. um, it seemed to get worse when more people joined, which I don't know if that really makes a lot of sense, but
Yeah,
anyway.
it's the bandwidth. Yeah, I don't know why it would be that. I mean, because it's built for like 30 people at least.
Yeah, but it was also like the distortion, the nature of the distortion, like just isn't here today at all. So hopefully it's fine.
Good. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'm actually at a different location than usual. So I, what I was saying before is I am sort of house sitting and cat sitting.
Oh yeah.
So there may be those noises, but I may also see if I can mitigate any cat toy noises.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's okay. All right. I don't think we have anyone else coming. Now it's Sunday. It's a little bit inconvenient maybe for a lot of people.
yeah,
But I wanted to do like a check in and see where people were. Um, and I for some things.
sure.
Um, so the first thing is the Alife.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we had the conference last week and it was a lot of interaction. I'm pretty tired. It was like we had workshops, we had talks, session talks, and then we had the Saturday thing yesterday. So that was pretty good. It was a panel discussion. So I mean, they just wanted one person from the from the talk or publication to join in and give some insights. Um, I was they took the recording that we made and they played it beforehand. So like people were sitting in the Zoom room and they were watching these recordings, and then we'd go to the question and answer session, which was it was pretty intriguing. There were a lot of interesting things that people were talking about, there's a lot to follow up on that. So I'm gonna think about it for a little bit and try to figure out like what the next steps are. So where do we go from here with this? Um, there were a lot of interesting things. There was a fair amount of interest in the developmental vehicles. I didn't get too many like suggestions of how it should be done differently. But in general, people like the layering concept.
Yeah, like that's actually something that I don't know. I want to have kind of a depending on whose episode about what we do and how much time we want to spend here today. Like I definitely want to go in depth, or at least ask a little more about the workshop and Alife stuff that you did. But there's a lot of things to kind of mention about Neuromatch itself. And actually, last night and also later today, let me see if I can find out when.
Okay.
Actually, let's test something. I'm gonna? Can you still hear me
Yes.
right now?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm shifting. I'm using my iPad to do this, and it's a different experience. Um, okay. Yeah, I think actually like directly after this, um, directly after, like at 11 o'clock Eastern time,
Yeah.
I think there's a continuation from last night's talk about they're like this professional development stuff, and I don't want to get into it all now, but professional development is kind of a wide umbrella. But basically, to put it into the sense, one of the organizers is really close friends with someone who does a lot of stuff, philosophy talk about consciousness and cognition. And so it was a really interesting discussion that had a lot of links to, like, if it was more involved and more time, I feel like there'd be a lot of really strong takeaways from what we're trying to do with developmental brain stuff and the layering concept to getting at some of the, like, as a means to test some of the foundations of, what, as a really interesting way to look at consciousness. And or just, like how I have talked about it in some of what was written for it is, about representation and things like that. But combining that with, well, even the non-neuronal cognition from Devo Worm stuff, I feel like there's just a lot of, at least a very rich area for a lot of related inquiry. So I'm curious to kind of take it back to the workshop now. I'm curious if there was, I guess there weren't a lot of specific suggestions, but I'm curious where the discussion went, or if people had thoughts about that.
Yeah, so we talked about like someone said, well, what about emotion? Can you have like a layer that's like an emotional circuit, or like something that would introduce emotional states? And so then we had a discussion about that. I mean, I figure you could. I mean, the layers are nondescript in the sense that we don't really give an explicit account of how they interact. So we cover that a little bit in the talk, but it's like, how do you get information into one layer and then get it up into the other layer, and then it communicates back, and then you have an output that's weighted, that represents the inputs of both, or the contributions of both layers. And so, but we talked about emotion as being, and of course we know in the brain that emotion does modulate a lot of lower, we call lower level behaviors, which are these, like taxic behaviors like phototaxis, or some motor command that's like a reflex. And so emotion can influence those, but we don't really know how to represent that. And I would imagine it would just be through connectivity. You have connections between two layers, one emotional and one sort of basal, if you want to call it that, and then there'd be an output that would be modulated in some way.
And I think that's like, I think there are a lot of, I feel like I might actually just bring this up in the discussion today, because last night was apparently the person, the speaker, like Lana Marachi or something like that. And then the organizer, Megan Peters, they were kind of hosting it last night. It was the last one at night, so I feel like if you were really actually there for it, you probably were very interested in the topic.
Yeah.
But there's another one today, and at 11, and it's more about robotics and related to those things. So I'm really curious to see what it is there, because I feel like I want to ask some questions in the sense of someone who's in that part of things. Because I feel like there's a lot of interesting ways to look into, how, even in this evolutionary biological structure standpoint, or developmental biology straight up, like how have the evolution of certain structures facilitated or constrained certain patterns of activity. Like that's something that we've come up a lot in the lab. But I'm really curious to see, I know there's like Josh Bogard or Bogart in UVM, and their Complex Systems Institute in Vermont, and evolutionary robotics. And that's one of the courses that has always been on my list to take. Is like an open course on robotic, like development, evolutionary robotics.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, I just feel like there's quite a bit there, and I'm curious how people from like Megan Peters and her lab on on consciousness and cognition and metacognition, and then this Marici, Marachi. I feel like I'm just very curious what they say in the context of that stuff. I think there might be a lot of leads for us to follow. What I'm saying. I'm a little bit sleepy this morning, but
that's okay. Yeah, they did mention that in the workshop. They said that topology matters in like the way they approach develop. Some of the people approach development, that the topology of the network that you're using matters. So if you have a topology that's, like a network with hidden hidden nodes, hidden layers, that the topology of those hidden layers actually matters. And the development is essential. We're reshaping those. So that's kind of what Stefan did in his Broadgen brain. That's how it works. Under the hood is that you have he generates these brains that are different topologies, and then they get selected based on their performance. And so, the idea, and I'm glad to see that validated, because it's something we worked on. Like, I remember early in that project, that part of the project, we worked on that, trying to figure out the best way to represent like development, and hit upon that. And so I think that's a general strategy. It does seem to be like the direction people are interested in going. So, and then, I don't know. They're like, is this kind of like we can make these different, we can shape a nervous system like that. And then, there is the whole idea of, well, what is it? Why do you have, there's timing. So how do these things happen in sequence? So, do things build upon one another, or do they emerge at some point in time? So, you have another person here.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Anson.
How are you, Anson?
Oh, I'm exhausted, but good.
Good. You have your good first week of Neuromatch?
Yeah, it was intense.
Imagine. Yeah.
I like my group members. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Our group project is fairly rigorous and interesting as well. I'm learning a lot.
Yeah.
I definitely just kind of crashed yesterday, though.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. So yeah, the group projects are I met with a bunch of people, a couple of groups on Friday. We talked about different projects. It's very diverse. They were just using the data sets, but they have a lot of different ideas about how to approach it.
Which data set? My group is using the Steinmetz data mostly.
Okay. Yeah.
One of my group members actually had a friend who worked at IBL for a couple of years. We got him to get this advice too.
Yeah. I like the
Small world neuroscience.
Yeah. I like the way they've been able to get these data sets open and get them to the point where people can use them in a class. I'm pretty impressed by that.
Yeah, they're my group or subgroup is working with the HCP data set, and it's nice I think they've been able to really add. And I know it's been kind of an issue because Neuromatch has had very particular data policies about privacy and whatnot, and so it sounds like they've done some work to get like some of the demographic or demographic represent metadata or information available too. So they're working on that, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, so that's good. Glad the first week went well. I think we had a conversation in Slack about how to deal with all the information. There's a lot of information being thrown at you, and it's like just in there, and because it's like this multimodal thing where you're going, you're sort of asynchronous, and you have recordings, and you have all this stuff, it's kind of hard to organize it all. So
Yeah. I feel like there's lots to be said about that, and I've raised conversations about some of that. And I think the pacing of the material itself is fine. I think that there's one and only one critique that I really have about Neuromatch, and I say this with love because I think it really affects how people will interface, especially people who aren't very familiar with academic settings or things like this, or just trying it out. And in the group, I think it comes down to this. In the group project, having the mixed experience levels, and I even say experience levels because I don't think they really decided by it. They kind of just assumed if you're at a specific level of, if you're an undergrad, then you're in the same boat. But I kind of feel like it's actually the opposite. Like if you're an undergraduate student, you could have a much wider gap of experience or familiarity than others, and you'd have less experience working collaboratively as well. So I feel like in the group project, the diversity of people is actually a great benefit, and that's worked out really well.
yeah,
But I've known a few people in a few different situations who, during the actual tutorial session, I think it's a little bit better to have people who want to go at a specific pace, because when people don't have that, it feels weird, and there's a lot of this sort of, there's all this, like, you hear people talking, oh, I think I just don't have time to pre-study everything and do this and that. Like, yes and no, because a lot of that comes from a kind of, I would discourage, like, that's like a symptom from comparing yourself to people who are interested in going at a particular pace based off of past experiences that you might not have. And I feel like that's just, like, that's something that could be filtered out a little bit better, or discussed, or like TA's given better advice on how to handle that, because it's not something that, it's just not something that people have time to really sort out or think about. And I know it's led to people dropping out of interactive tracks when they don't really need to. So I know I'm having a bit of a soapbox speech about it, but I just feel like I've dealt with that on different levels, and I'm totally fine with where I am and what we sorted out in the group. But I feel like, I think the next time there's a Neuromatch around, and I hope there will be, and I'm trying to help that come the best that I can. I think that's like a big thing to fix, because when you're learning and there's just really different paces, like you having all these plans about, oh, I gotta do this, oh my god, I don't have time, I gotta go and do this. It's like, that's not what should be happening, in my opinion, and I don't, even the organizers are saying that, but it's like, it's different when you're seeing these, you know, it can just be very strange. So I think a lot of people don't have the experience necessary to say, oh, it's not that I'm terrible and I'm not good at neuroscience, it's that I really should be in a different setting so that my learning could be as good as it needs to be at. And that's it. So, like, I know that's a semi-rant, but there are ways that it resolves. I just feel like it shouldn't take the majority of the first week for people to figure that out in a group, because that will push people out of the groups. So, constructive criticism aside, yeah, I've totally enjoyed the first week. It's been great. It's been very robust, and I've really taken to heart, because I'm very particular about this, but like, the rant that I had isn't the same as information through a fire hose, and a lot of the advice that has come in the question and answer sessions, like, that's totally true and valid, and I'm on board with that. Like, you have to. I relate that from the motto of, you know, don't be frustrated, and like, that's exactly right. Like, don't be frustrated, and don't, if you're feeling frustrated, consider if it's because you just need a different pace and a different set of expectations and an environment where you feel those pace and those expectations are completely legitimate to have. And I feel like that's what it's about. And if you can get that, then yeah, there's nothing to be frustrated about. You know, this is building the foundation of the library, not getting the entire, reading all the books. You know, there have been a lot of great analogies from the mentors, and I know that they know that. So I think to that end, like Neuromatch is a huge success, and I feel like I have so many conceptual doors being opened, and I'm getting forward to work on. Like, I never worked with machine learning projects with fMRI data, and I'm glad that I'm going to have the chance to do that. I'm not going to be an expert in either of those things by the time I'm done. We're done with this, but like getting this intuition for a lot of. I feel like Neuromatch is a great computational exposure, regardless of whatever. Like, it happens to be neuro data right now, but the principles and the emphasis, the I imagine like, I don't know, if I was an organizer, I would feel, I don't know how to really say this. As an organizer, or I'll just say as a student, I feel really great that the emphasis has largely been on learning. Like there's not hard evaluations on, do you know this right answer right now? And I feel like the focus being on learning and being on concepts and being on, are you showing up and are you expanding yourself and are you doing these things? Like, I think it's really helpful. And I've actually not really, I haven't really been in an environment that was what I feel like is so tailored to learning. And that's why I feel like that is great, and that also sort of amplifies what I said earlier, because if you're making that the focus of the summer school, which I think is great and it should be, is like if you have a chink in the chain, it can really hurt that. So if I feel like the things that I'm trying to point out are like the premise and the overall execution of Neuromatch is fantastic. I think it's groundbreaking and awesome, and the way it's able to, at its best, integrate stuff. Like if Season was here, I saw he had like a really good comment on Twitter about this. I think Season's also in Anson's group. Is that right? So,
yeah, he's in my group. I'm doing the research project with him too.
Yeah, like the dynamics in the group seem to be worked out just fine in that, and that's. And I'm not.
Wait, what was Season's tweet?
It was something like, I'm really. It sounded like it was basically something that said like, it was like what Neuromatch should be like, in the sense of, I'm not saying this is what he said. What he specifically said was something like, I'm really fortunate to have such a diverse set of people who are, you know, different fields of expertise and levels coming together to work to have a great experience. Something like that. Yeah. And I feel like that's completely what Neuromatch is able to do and deliver, and that's largely what I've experienced myself, and I'm very happy about that. I just feel like when the conditions are right, you know, that's like an amazing experience, and largely that's what I've experienced as well. So it's just making sure that there aren't like the initial, if you will, the initial conditions have to be in a certain range of I don't want to say like compatibility, but like being on the same page enough and having the right approach. Because yeah, when that happens, it's great. And when there's a certain amount of strain between experience levels of pacing, or when I had someone reach out to me also actually on Twitter, talk about things, and it's like a certain pod was really committed to a certain kind of viewpoint, or like experimental focus versus theoretical focus, and it was like, you know, that's fine. Like I don't expect things to be, and nobody should expect things to be completely perfect, but it's just, I think it'd be really interesting to sort of do if anybody's listening to this, I would just encourage you, yes, definitely fill out your daily review forms, because getting feedback on the daily experiences and on what's going on in the pod like that's really helpful for people who are structuring the course. And I'm 100% sure that everybody, like, there's so many volunteers and organizers trying to make it work. Like, the spirit and the heart of what's going on is, remarkable. And I feel like in like 95% of everything, it's like above and beyond. So I'm kind of monologuing about this, and I'd like to turn it over to something else. But yeah, overall, my experience has been great, and it's been, it's kind of set in that, I'm putting in like 12 hours, kind of 13-hour days with my day job at times, and it's like, that's a lot, but it's great. Like, it's a great, I'm not regretting any of it. I've had zero thoughts about, I want to go back to Observer, or I want to, I don't know if I can do this, or is it working? It's like, no, it's like really taking to heart the advice of just don't be frustrated about anything and make it conceptual. That's another, if we can have a round of what did we enjoy, what we think would be better. I've kind of taken like 4 rounds of that in a row. So if you want to have any commentary about your experiences, Anson, you can.
Yeah, Anson, how did you enjoy your first week? Is there anything that
I tend to relate to what Jesse said. I think in my case, it's more the chronic health issues that caused issues for me, in that, like, I did have thoughts about going to Observer, but mostly just because there were a lot of times where I just had to be in the group and kind of zoned out because I had a migraine. But I think I feel lucky that my group, I have good chemistry with my group and my TA. I thought about emailing her about it, but I think I might actually. But I feel like I really enjoy the atmosphere, and that's what's kept me motivated to keep going. Luckily, I actually feel like I actually enjoy the camaraderie I have with my group and our interactions. I think it's been good to have more direct insight, even if it's above my current prerequisite background knowledge. It's been good to have exposure to applications that motivate strong foundations, and exposure to people who have similar paths. Like, I talked to that guy who worked at IBL for a couple of years, gave us some advice about grad school, and potentially getting a research position, or if I'm going to take a gap year before grad school. And I think just getting lay of the land of computational neuroscience is very good. I think I probably don't want to go straight up into neuroscience, though it depends on the advisor, but I think what I want to go into is directly adjacent, so it's been good for me to see the different approaches, mindsets, and specializations. I do think this would be easier if I did have a stronger foundation of knowledge, which I could have structured differently beforehand. But overall, I still feel like I'm more so gaining a layer. My friend, my podmate says that even though he's not picking up all ideas, he is learning how to, he didn't say talk shop, but basically he feels like he's learning how to talk the language and utilize things, even though he's not picking up everything. In my case, I feel like I feel like I can't do that, but I'm still getting the lay of the land, which is still important. And I think I'll probably learn a few things in depth related to the project, and other things will have to remain something that I fill in later, but I'm okay with that, and it's still very interesting to be around.
Yeah, I think that's the necessary approach because there's just not time to go in depth.
Yeah, like there's no real way you can pick this up unless you have really, really strong foundations or you've already learned material, at least books material.
Right, which is exactly what it is. Like they're not learning faster. They just learned it ahead of time in a lot of cases, or like very much have the direct foundation needed. So I think it's just fine.
Yeah, I think the career advice aspect is interesting. Just comparing getting advice.
Yeah, go ahead.
I definitely need to pin down professors and universities I'm interested ASAP, and also like even if I end up, I didn't even know I could apply for like research assistant jobs as a gap year option, and I think that kind of changes my plans a little bit in terms of like possibly doing an internship this year, school year.
That's kind of what I wanted to do as well. I'm looking at those. I definitely relate to what you said about. I don't think I'm just going to be a straight bio person, but it definitely in like neuroscience, biology, in that general sense. But between Neuromatch as a heavy computational modeling driven event that focuses on neuroscience data, and also honestly, a plug for the open worm study group. Like those things have really helped me, and to really delineate kind of like, okay, here's because like the stuff that we're interested in, even in this group, like it's extremely adjacent. Like you're not going to get away from. I mean, you can, but you're not going to like necessarily get away from dealing with the biological side of things and data. And I don't want to do that. It's just as far as figuring out what my focus is. Like yeah, it really helps to see here's what's going on, and the diversity of the organizers is great too. Because like I'm really curious to see more. I'm really curious about Megan Peters. Because her lab is about like metacognition and a lot of these things that she's the one running the consciousness. I don't think Anson was around when I was talking about the consciousness discussion last night. I mentioned it to him last night though. But just see like big picture view, the diversity of the organizers and the focus and like it's kind of like it reminds me a lot of my motivation behind like frontier maps that put into an academy of like if you had to do a frontier map of computational neuroscience and try to bring in a lot of like techniques and some ideas and some of the philosophy behind it, like that's this huge broad overview of like graduate level and some like cutting edge stuff in the field that's huge, and I feel very much better at maybe not better at, but I feel like my understanding of okay, if I want to go into a straight neuroscience or a straight even computational neuroscience program and what I would be doing, like I'm a lot better at that, but also understand, well, yeah, I do, and even in something in the lab currently here, I am doing modeling, and it's just what do I want to do with the modeling? How do I increase my general like, technical modeling and computational skill set and sort of its own transferable skills that apply to everything? And what's the data that I want to focus on, and how do I find it? And even last night, I think I'm actually really I really appreciate. Honestly, frankly, I thought it'd be kind of boring, especially because I already know about it in this lab about all the open science stuff. I'm like, oh, I'll just put this on in the background. But I took some really good stuff away from that too, in the sense of understanding, yes, the importance of openness, open science, open data, which was a somewhat familiar concept to me at this point. But how they showed certain people using open data as it is now to do something, that was a very interesting concept. I feel like there's actually probably a lot more out there than I have come to understand. So, going back to what I'm saying about tools and skill sets and then arenas and data that I want to work in or work on from the empirical or data side out into, okay, how do we model it? And then what are the questions? You know, and the questions in the philosophy, I feel like you could have a whole, and I think we'll get into this when it comes to causality and some of the things later on, or like getting into, I don't know, I'll pause my speaking here by saying, I actually 100% enjoy, I have absolutely no issues with the pacing of the material and the breadth and depth of the discussion. In part just because I'm probably naive, ignorant of the field, but I have no actual, I feel like it's great, and I feel like it's really well done in terms of specific concepts and then ways to look into the philosophy or the data that show there. So,
yeah. Well, I'm glad that both of you are having a good experience. And I also encountered the open science discussion on Slack. That was Jesse just kind of pointing that out, I think, last night or yesterday. And I did want to follow up on that, not today, but like in future meetings, because I think that's a core competency, I think, for a lot of people in the future, especially. You have to understand that open science is a relatively new area. So there are a lot of people trying to, develop curriculum in the area and show their sort of demonstrating how they're doing it for the first time, or maybe establishing procedures. So it's always good to get to incorporate that into the curriculum. Glad that they've done that, because it hasn't been the norm, hasn't been the norm for that long. It's maybe been about less than a decade probably where it's been the norm. And so I was going to look at some of those materials and the lab in general here is pretty interested in open science. We're interested in open data. We have the data reuse initiative, which is, of course, oriented towards that. But we also have other things that we could do. DevoWorm is very heavily based in open science and open source. And that's another area that if people are interested in, we can talk more about or, do something interesting with. So I was going to also mention, and I forgot at the beginning about going back to the Alife discussion, that I'm going to probably present on the Alife conference.
Yeah.
Sort of my impressions on it next time. We'll see if that happens. It's just, I have to digest a lot of it, and they have a lot of stuff going on there. I actually also presented on on OpenWorm at it was a session where we had lightning talks, and I presented a 5-minute thing. So I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see how to do this.
One last thing about the data, open use, open data, open science stuff. I think it's really cool that I think it was the speaker of the host. It might have been Rutz. That's his last name. But he's at Stanford and saying, we're hiring postdocs with the specific section of what involved in the open science that we have, that they're actually affecting how they're choosing candidates. So.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to.
And that's good to point that out.
Yeah. So speaking of which, Jesse, you sent me this description a couple weeks ago, and full disclosure, I did receive your application for Google Season of Docs, so I'll be reviewing those in the next couple weeks. But
Okay.
This is the thing you sent me for the lab manager.
My screen, I see it in the preview, but I don't see.
You have
I
to
can't make your screen large enough.
I think you have to click on the. Let me see. Oh, is that? Do you see it now?
Let's see here. I see it in the thumbnail, but it's not showing up on my. It might probably be.
Click on the thumbnail because I think it's just
Well, either way, I found a way to see it. So.
Okay. So let's see. I'm going to go back to the actual page here. All right. So this is the lab manager roles and duties. This is something you sent me as a draft, and I'm going to review it. I haven't really thought of any changes to it yet, but I'm going to go through it more in depth here. You know, with preparing for Neuromatch and Alife, it was a little.
Oh yeah, same for me. So.
Yeah. I mean, I see it looks good. I mean, you have like the primary responsibilities, specific duties, open science and community engagement. So now, in light of your experience with that, in terms of the presentations, maybe we can flesh this out a little bit. I'll look at it and see what the descriptions are. You know, if this is a good description.
Yeah.
Minimum qualifications. Yeah, I think that's. I'll tidy that up a bit. The preferences. Familiar with Colab notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, GitHub and Markdown. Those are all key. Writing in literacy and common coding languages such as Python and R. Experience in machine learning, agent-based modeling. Yeah. And then experience of distributed team and virtual working environments. That's pretty important. Experience with collaboration across various backgrounds. Yes. Interested in science communication. Yes. And a undisciplinary approach to the lab's primary areas of interest. Yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to change how you link that word, but you kind of get to have the flavor of that on there somewhere.
Yeah. So, well, that looks good. I need access. I requested access, but.
Oh, it's still in the Senate? I accepted it like twice on my phone app, but I didn't. I'll fix that afterwards.
Sometimes it does. It's a little tricky, but I've done that with like things I share off of the opennorm.org account, and it like I have to approve every single person. Doesn't want to do it but anyways, yeah. So that's that, and I'll get back with you on that this week. Now let me share my screen again. I wanted to point this out to people. So, and I know you don't have enough on your plate now, but there's the computational neurosciences conference is going on now.
Yeah.
So this is actually streaming on Crowdcast. So I'm not sure what the. I think it's OCNS. If you want to follow along, I think you can just go into crowdcast.io and go to OCNS, and you can follow along with these talks. They're just a lot of talks, different topics in computational neuroscience, and I think like all the other crowdcast things, you can be there live or watch it afterwards later. So that's the beauty of that, because you don't have to pack it in all in one sitting. You don't have to like rearrange your schedule. So
actually, one of my Gilly from my group has a poster presentation there, so I'm going to check that out later. Yeah, she's presenting today. Yeah,
presenting something.
Yes.
Yeah. So then finally, this is the thing that I have a bunch of stuff that I was going to talk about today. And I don't know, this field finding discussion is something that I've not found the proper segue for, but I'll probably talk about that maybe in another week or something. But no, maybe I'll talk about it now. This is a little bit different than what we were talking about with organizing things for Neuromatch, but maybe not so much. So let's see if I can find the first place to start here. So this actually was something that was a Twitter thread by Michael Nielsen, who you might be interested in following. He always has a lot of interesting stuff to say about a lot of academic stuff. He has a background in quantum computing, but they've done a lot of stuff with note-taking systems and other kinds of interesting things. So he had this thread from 2018, is it July of 2018, where he talks about in research, both problem finding and problem solving are important. Surprisingly often, problem finding is more important than problem solving. And so this is the idea that if you have, people talk about what's your question all the time. And so that's important, but what's also important is that we understand kind of what field it might fit into, or what broader context. And some of that, of course, we call it theory. You have someone else in Jesse, you have to mute one of your devices.
Is this not muted?
Is it? I think it stopped. Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. So let's see. Let me go back to the thing. So he talks about there is a rare related activity which I think of as field finding. It's not about problem finding per se, but rather about developing an underlying narrative, which generates many superb problems over decades or centuries. And so he says that there, sometimes people write specific papers to find a field. So Turing's papers on computing, or his paper on computing, I think he means the one where he did, talked about the Turing machine, is field finding. So too are Feynman and Deutsch's papers on quantum computing. So that's his personal area. But let's see. By comparison, the early Sanger sequencing papers were field finding. They started a field, but not field finding, since it was obvious for many years prior that sequencing DNA was a good idea, or RNA. Sanger et al. Were the first to really figure out how to do it. Obviously, the distinction isn't black and white. In Turing's case, you can argue that the problem of developing a notion of effective computation was implicit in earlier work, but Turing understood the big picture problem superbly and made it obvious this was a field. So this is an example of a field finding paper, I think. So this is the David Deutsch paper, Quantum Theory, the Church-Turing Principle, and the Universal Quantum Computer. And so in this paper they talk about, they lay out the problem. So they say it is argued that underlying the Church-Turing hypothesis there is an implicit physical assertion. Here this assertion is presented explicitly as a physical principle. And then classical physics and the universal Turing machine, because the former is continuous and the latter is discrete, do not obey the principle. And so then a class of model computing machines that is the quantum generalization of the class of Turing machines is described. So he goes into this version of the Turing machine. And then he talks about computing machines resemble the universal quantum computer could, in principle, be built and would have many remarkable properties, not reproducible by any Turing machine. So he's kind of introducing this thing. I don't even know. I guess at that point, in 1985, it was more of a thought experiment. But they did talk about this sort of where it fits into the literature. And then he he talks about some of the numerous connections between the quantum theory of computation and the rest of physics are explored. So he's situating it within physics. Then quantum complexity theory allows a physically more reasonable definition of the complexity or knowledge in a physical system that does classical complexity theory. So this is just, again, framing it sort of into that world of theory. So that's what a field finding paper is. It basically takes a problem and then situates it into your discipline or a number of disciplines. And then from that, you can carve out a field. And I guess that's all post hoc, because on the one hand, you have this thing that you're just kind of talking about at the time. You don't know if people are going to follow up on it and build a field around it. On the other hand, you're kind of situating it for future discovery. And that's the important thing here. So this is an example from Sanger, who actually invented DNA sequencing. It's a well-known discovery. And I don't know if this is going to come up. Okay,
I don't know if it's just me, but I can't seem to see your screen right now.
Huh.
I don't know if I can see it.
No, I don't know.
I think it's probably just me, so never mind.
Well, yeah, I'll just read through and so I think this is a different part of the thread. This is, I guess, the same part of the thread.
I can't see your screen either.
You can't. Let me stop and let me reshare it. I don't know why it won't share, but
I may still be seeing the lab manager description if that's being displayed instead.
No, I don't think so. Let me close out of those first of all. I don't know why it's glitching here, but okay. Let me reshare it and let's see if we can do it. Can you see it now?
I don't think so.
I mean, it shows up on yeah.
It's okay though. I don't mean to interrupt anything.
Well, that's fine. We'll just go through the rest of it. Sorry about that. It'll show up if you want to look at it on YouTube. It'll be there.
Okay, great.
So this is kind of I've seen and heard lots of discussion of field founding, usually in a singular-like context, figuring out how to make progress on big problems that are more or less obvious to everyone. So this is like kind of framing a big problem, but in a way that like kind of defines the scope of it. So we talk about that a lot in this group. Big problems that people talk about as big problems, but they don't really kind of define it down into like, what is this actually about? What kinds of tools can we bring to bear? Sometimes, if you think about it in terms of what the big problem brings together, that's, I think, maybe a field founding exercise or a field finding exercise. So, but I've heard very, very little about field finding, and I believe field finders are incredibly valuable for science and dramatically undervalued by existing institutions. It's surprisingly hard to think of a field finding paper that was supported by a grant. It's a case where you, by definition, can't make a strong prior argument for the work. In fact, the whole job is to figure out the basic concepts that will make an argument even possible. So again, this is something that we do with the epistemological directories in a way, because we're kind of bringing things together, a bunch of references in one place. So you can't motivate the founding paper of computer science by referring to some prior notion of how important computers are. You're actually trying to invent the notion of computers and argue for its importance. And so let's see if this is part of the same thread. This was a very long thread. I just wanted to point that out. So such papers often argue on very fundamental grounds. Consider this line of argument, which taken sufficiently seriously leads to quantum computers and possibly other notions of computation. So this is from this paper I mentioned earlier here. So he goes on to reinterpret Turing's functions, which would naturally be regarded as computable. So he takes a quote from Turing. and he looks at like how they can be computed by a real physical system, and this is in a classical system, and then converts that over into something quantum computational. And so then he says, it would surely be hard to regard a function naturally as computable if it could not be computed in nature. And conversely, to this end, I shall define a notion of perfect simulation. And then he goes on to do that. And then he states a physical version of the Church-Turing principle. So he goes back to Turing and brings up this physical version of the principle. And then, this is kind of the way he sort of approaches this field finding exercise. He goes back and forth to the source material, and he kind of looks at it in a new way. Finally, there's this paper. This is the Sanger paper. So this was, again, the Sanger, the person I just told you about. This is from Citable, which is a reference Nature Education. It's it's almost like a Wikipedia, but it's a little bit more in depth. They talk about Frederick Sanger, who, just kind of a bio, what Sanger did. And then there's a Sanger method, and then led to the Nobel Prize. So there isn't much about field finding in this, but it does tell you, or field founding even, but it tells you something about, what led to that these sort of insights. So this is something that I wanted to present for a while, and I know it's a little bit late in the meeting to have any meaningful discussion about it, but I wanted to bring it up. Maybe we'll continue this discussion into next week. The other thing I wanted maybe for next week we'll do is a thing that came up on Slack, explain something like you're 5 years old. So this is Jesse on Twitter and Bobby Traum, and they're talking about this. It was from a thread by Anna Hughes, who asked, briefly explain your research to me like I'm 5 years old. And Jesse says, does a fish in a fishbowl realize that you're not swimming? And so, that's one way of looking at, I guess, neuroscience. But it's something I think that you can. I don't know. Well, we can talk about it in future meetings. Maybe we can come up with some 5-year-olds descriptions of what's going on at Neuromatch or.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting concept, and even the way that I wrote that about fish in a fishbowl, does it realize that you're not swimming? Like, the question almost bothers me in some way, but I feel like there's a certain kind of I wish I knew the language better, but there's a certain kind of tension that it builds in my mind, not like dramatic tension, but I don't know if it's a literary term or something actually in pedagogical whatever, but it motivates. Let's just say it motivates a certain kind of I wouldn't change or correct the question somehow, when I see it, to be honest. But I think also in terms of a very simple thing of a fish in a fishbowl, and then it's okay, that's a simple concept, and something that someone very young or at a very particular level of world experience could deal with, and then it's and then we're associating. What do you think the fish understands? And I feel like that, and being able to talk about their environment and what the fish's experience are, that lives in a lot of questions about even all the affordances stuff from a few weeks ago. So it's I think the exercise is simple questions that are kind of loaded, even with different connotations or whatever, but that are sort of kernels or nuggets of ways that you could expand upon them. And I feel like I think there's something very interesting about that, and I feel like that's kind of an art form almost in science and science communication, or even just educational, just educational stuff. So yeah, that'd be fun to talk about next time for sure. And also well, you said you're going to already talk about Alife more too. So yeah.
Yeah. Anson, what did you have any thoughts?
I'll be honest, I got distracted by something.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine. Is there anything that you particularly like to talk about in upcoming meetings?
I'm learning dimensional analysis in Neuromatch right now.
Yeah.
I think, and we're applying to the Steinmetz data. I plan to go over the particular technique we're going to apply today on my own. I think I can probably do an update about that next week. I think that'd be interesting. Otherwise, I'm taking this opportunity of being around other people kind of interested in similar graduate programs to try to research professors and identify universities. So I think that'd be interesting to discuss if you guys.
Yeah, actually, that's something we could. I don't know if Bradley would be up for that, but that's something that would probably be useful for a lot of people here.
Oh, yeah, I think that would be good. Yeah, so I mean, again, you can, if you want to do a short presentation or just a discussion on it, that would be, we're pretty open to what you want to, how you want to approach it. But
yeah, I think I'm at the point where I'm trying to narrow down what topics within the field interest me and identify professors. I think getting feedback on that would be helpful.
Yeah, and this is something that kind of came up either in, like, I don't know if it was the Friday night meetings or other things, but this is in many different discussions, even with the embodied community group. Like, it's one thing to say you want, like, oh, maybe I'll say play. If you want to get a PhD in computer science, okay, that can be one specific thing, or a PhD in computational cognitive science or neuroscience. But the process by which you're getting that degree in the different institutions of the different PIs can be dramatically different. And I think, especially to people in this lab or in this general, the way that we look at things or like to look at things, I think there's it's not like we're an endangered species or anything like that, but it's just, I personally very much like to talk about that more because there's sort of, like, there's just a whole set of, like, I probably want to do a computer science PhD, probably, but there's just like a whole set of computer science PhD programs that I would feel like, I'll just say that I don't have any of them, I feel like they'd be really not. If I did them, I would get the PhD, but it would be just not at all tailored towards what I want to do. And I feel like talking about that disparity would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be good because I've had some I have some comments on opinions and comments on it.
And comments.
Yeah, but it largely goes back to my experience actually. As someone who is kind of like, you have a lot of interests that straddle different fields, so we should talk about that.
Yeah. How do you decide for your how do you decide what you want to pursue in graduate studies?
Well, I mean, it was an iterative process. I actually did a master's degree in kind of a different field, and I got a PhD. I did a lot of different things in a PhD, where, as most people do, like if you do a focused curriculum. So, I mean, it's a little bit different. I approached it quite differently, but I think if, these program, I was in a program that was pretty broad in terms of its, what I would be able to do and what I had to get exposed to. So, like, if you went into a standard computer science department, you'd have to take some core courses in computer science, and then that would be, and then you'd probably have to pick something very canonically computer science. Now, some computer science departments have, like, interactions with cognitive science and computational biology and all these other groups, which makes it a little bit easier to, get exposure to those areas, like, more directly, and not just, like, as an aside, you know what I mean, like, in terms of the curriculum.
Yeah.
But so that there's always that issue of picking a program that's, is it sufficiently, can it train you in different areas besides just core computer science? And that's a problem because and of course they look at it in some departments, they're actually very, shall we say, biased towards people who are pure computer scientists in terms of thinking about like funding or hiring, and it's like, it's very hard to, it's a problem, because computer science actually was founded out of a bunch of different disciplines that came together and just hung together as like computer science, like when we're doing programming, and so it was like psychology, mathematics, and linguistics, and all these other cognate areas that came together, and then they founded a field, like I was just talking about, and then it just kind of had its own internal dynamics, and so some departments are very sort of canonical to programming and some very specific computer science theory. Others are much broader in their approach, and they allow for other things. So it's like it just depends on the university. But
I'm also considering pursuing something like machine learning, possibly statistics, a straight up cog sci degree, computational neuroscience depending on the advisor.
Yeah, it's a lot to explore. It is, like I said, it is very iconoclastic in a lot of ways. Like, depending on your advisors, depending on the department, the university, those are all factors to consider.
Right now, my approach is basically trying to identify researchers who are studying things I'm interested in, and then seeing what universities they're part of, and then narrowing it down based off of what program seems suitable.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of the neuroscience people in my pod are pretty straightforward about like I'm going to go to neuroscience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think like if I really wanted to go for the closest degree, it'd definitely be computational cognitive science.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm not sure if that's. I would definitely need to find the right advisor, and it's not just that.
I would feel like, Anson, if you want, like, I don't know if you want to do a presentation or discussion, and in reality, it may not be next week because we have no time for anything, but like after Neuromatch, if you want to go, I would be interested in going in depth on that. And even like, I feel like I've looked at what is computational cognitive science, or even computational cognitive neuroscience, but like what. I feel like I would like to look more into what that is, because it just by names and title alone, like, yeah, that seems to be the best match of things for me and probably you. But I feel like there are also, I don't know, that'd be something to compare and contrast, I guess. Kind of late for today's meeting. So I don't know if there's anything else we wanted to talk about today.
I don't think so. So we're past the top of the hour, and I wanted to, wish you luck on the second week of Neuromatch. I guess this is the week you really kind of get into your projects, and so that's going to be taking time as well.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
A shout out to the project that the lab has suggested, because I think it's very cool, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to do it during Neuromatch, but I think it'd be cool to look at that after Neuromatch. So noting that.
I don't know how people are approaching it. I think there are like some elements of it, maybe I'll find out this week what people are thinking about that. But I think we can do like a more straightforward exploration of that, like in terms of feedback, complexity of feedback and representations. And I think with the stuff that I encountered at Alife, it might actually help as well, and I'll talk about this next week, but there was a lot of stuff on like homeostasis and in artificial intelligence, and like how you might evolve artificial intelligence, or how it fits into sort of this artificial life idea. So we'll talk about that more. But What was
I
that?
want, there's like something I wanted to find papers about when I was applying for potential grad schools. What was the name of that field? Like, what's the name for, like, what should I put into a research database if I'm looking for homeostatic systems research?
Well, I think if you look at, like, there's artificial life, or Alife. Then also people have been doing things with, and this is a little bit dated, but they've done things with what they call animats. So these are like virtual animals. You know, it's an older term. Maybe, you know, I guess just Alife, animats, maybe cognitive agents. It's kind of hard to like kind of find a really good term, but I think Alife and animats are probably the two biggest ones. I'll be sure to highlight that next week.
Yeah, some complex system stuff seems good too.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, it's a complex systems is going to give you a lot of hits, so filter that down a bit. But yeah, they do talk a lot about complex systems there. So.
Yeah. I think I'm going to spend a little bit of time today doing that. Otherwise, you know, read the papers that my pod recommended for a research project. To make toy models of the technique you want to apply, so I can understand that one inside out, and then that should set me up for the second week of NeuroMatch. I also, do you think the philosophy talks are worth watching, Jesse?
I enjoyed them. It wasn't like groundbreaking, but I enjoyed them to hear. Personally speaking, I enjoyed I really want to understand Megan Peters more and lab more. So between that and someone who's approaching it from a philosophy perspective purely, I wouldn't say like it's not urgent. You don't have, like if you don't watch it this week, it's not going to make or break anything. But I would encourage it, and I want to check out their. It's sort of like it's like a two-part talk, because the first part was philosophy and looking at cognition or consciousness through some of the means of how to test for that last night. And today is going to be robotics and those topics again, I believe. So together, I feel like it's maybe the most relevant direct commentary on some of the stuff that we'd be interested in, like conceptually and philosophy here. So I would say check it out. And I will look at it. I'm probably going to go over that one again. If you want to do maybe we can do a watch party for that. And I do want to check out the robotics one that's on now. So yeah. So short answer, yes, not urgent right now, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for meeting on Sunday instead of Saturday.
Oh yeah, it's Monday's soon approaching, and week 2 was here, and it's really cool that we're all in NeuroMatch together. So that's cool, and even the people who aren't here. A lot of people I talked to, like Stephen and Bobby and others. Even Rebecca is checking it out too, even if she's not here right now. So
how is she doing with NeuroMatch?
She's doing observer track stuff, so it's good. But yeah, thanks to everybody who's participating in all this stuff, and have a good week too. And we'll get through it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Thanks, guys. See you later.
All right.
See you.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.